Chapter 931, If Strength is Not Enough, Use Brains. Immortal Masters, profound spell High Holiness said uneasily, "What should we do now? The three fairies have that spiritual treasure, I'm afraid we can't defeat them." The Immortal Masters exchanged a look and said while laughing, "If any unknown and insignificant immortals can suppress us just because they have one or two powerful spiritual treasures, then anyone in the world can overthrow our families after taking a tour in the primeval relic. Immortal Master, you're right." Profound spell High Holiness suddenly understood the situation. If the 8 immortal families that had existed countless years was rendered powerless by one treasure from nowhere, wouldn't they have been destroyed countless times long ago? But, profound spell High Holiness asked again, "Do you have any immortal spells to teach us, 3 immortal masters?" The 3 immortal masters exchanged a look and then glanced at profound spell High Holiness before laughing. Then, Avadio Immortal Master said, "But some problems in this world don't need strength to solve them." He smiled and said, "We don't need to confront them head-on." "Do you mean?" Profound spell High Holiness's eyes lit up as a chilly smile appeared on his face. "Everyone has weaknesses. If we can find their weaknesses, then isn't it a piece of cake to defeat them? If not necessary, they wouldn't let these elders take risks since the families had spent lots of energy to raise them, and they were human resources that the families couldn't afford to lose." The ignorant beings who know nothing but using the power of spiritual treasures look powerful, but without a solid foundation. They are just rootless trees. He smiled in contempt. "When the wind blows, they will fall." Innumerable Tribulation Immortal Master looked as if he was no stranger to this idea. After all, over many years of history, the 8 major immortal families had collected countless treasures, and not all of them were obtained by their own merits. Then, hearing his words, profound spell High Holiness was delighted and said, "With that ultimate treasure, this being has possessed the power of a true immortal, and even we can't defeat him. But he must open the shop to teach cultivation methods to people and has formed a close relationship with these mortals. The other day, they even used the so-called resurrection spells when the legion under the evil god from the ninefold darkness invaded. I think that they must have used a lot of their vital essence and can't use such skills again for a long while. In other words, even though that being has some power due to that treasure, he still has a mortal mindset which indulges in all kinds of feelings and desires such as kinship and friendship, which could become his weak points. Then, it's easy," Innumerable Tribulation Immortal Master said. Avadio Immortal Master said calmly as well, "I heard that this figure wanted to battle the godly army and demonic army at the same time with his own power. Despite his abilities, he is a bit too arrogant. Fighting on 3 battlegrounds, he must be under tremendous pressure and will surely show weaknesses. We only need to bypass the primary battleground and catch him off guard," Avadio Immortal Master added. Hearing his words, profound spell High Holiness looked grim and said, "Wondrous spell High Holiness had people investigate him. This figure has some secret tricks up his sleeves, and the shop must have something to do with that ultimate treasure. I heard that someone tried to launch sneak attacks in the shop and was instantly suppressed by lightning bolts the moment he walked through the door. I'm afraid that this being knows his weaknesses, so he is well protected." "The shops are protected, but what about outside the shops?" Avadio Immortal Master said, "He has friends, and his friends have relatives who have their own friends, so on and so forth, involving almost all the people in the world. The mortals are so stupid with their connections," Avadio Immortal Master said with a smile. "I heard that a little girl from the demon clan is very close to him, and the girl's relatives all live in the demon nation, far from the humans. Am I right?" Profound spell High Holiness replied in surprise, "Right." Then, he said in a low voice, "There are more. The Nalan family, Liuyan Taoist Palace, Heavenly Academy, and the other races living in the elf forest on the west continent are all close to him. One who aims big must disregard the trivial things and know when to forego things. But unfortunately, this being's way of doing things is ridiculously naive. I'm afraid that he is still living in his idealized world. He can protect the people in his shops, but can he protect these weak mortals related to them? Dragonpool Immortal Master said with a snicker, he's doomed to fail and work for others. So, this treasure is a gift to us from the heavens. If we don't take it, isn't it disrespecting the great treasure? Innumerable Tribulation Immortal Master said with a laugh. Indeed. Dragonpool Immortal Master clapped his hands in appreciation and said to Profound Spell High Holiness and others, we'll stay here to stall the three fairies. For now, we can't loan you other treasures, but, the Immortal Masters exchanged a look and said gravely, your mission is very important, so. Dragonpool Immortal Master took a token from his belt and said, you guys take my token and return to Saint Emperor Palace. I'll loan you an ultimate great treasure, which was born in the time before the heavens formed, for 7 days. Take this treasure to the lower region and quickly capture all his friends and their relatives. Perhaps it's not enough. Innumerable Tribulation Immortal Master said, Avidia Taoist friend and I will also give you our tokens. Vast spell, vital spell. You two go and take the 3 spirit treasures I left in Innumerable Tribulation Palace, just in case that he has some secret trump cards. Be quick. Yes. They immediately answered, by that time, I'll see what he'll do. When the mission is accomplished, you will all be well rewarded. They were immensely delighted at the promise. Thank you, Immortal Masters. At this moment in the battlegrounds in the mortal world, swords were drawn, and murderous spirit filled every corner. In contrast, the Saint Emperor Mountain was full of delightful atmosphere. Yaoju was holding a square-shaped strange communication jade. It was the back garden of the Gui family. Some young men sat at a stone table in a circle, each holding an identical strange communication jade in hand. Brother Yao, look at my auspicious beast. It has techniques such as advanced countershock, suppression of Mount I, and, before he could finish, they heard noises outside. The disciple with surname Gui stood up immediately and looked outward. At this moment, a middle-aged man who looked quite like the young man walked in. What are you guys doing here? Come with me and welcome the return of High Holiness Elders. Elders? The young men of Gui family asked in bafflement. Dad, didn't the elders go to the lower region to kill the demons? How come they have time to come back? Chapter 932, Taoist friend. Please wait, I'm not sure. The middle-aged man said, it's said that those demons are too powerful, even the High Holiness Elders don't want to battle them head-on, so, they plan to attack from the side. Attack from the side? What else can it mean? Who doesn't have relatives and friends? It's said that Profound Spell High Holiness will go to the territory of the demon clan in the mortal world. Why do they need treasures if they're going to the mortal world? The young man was even more puzzled, wondering why the lofty elders would come back to get treasures before descending to the lower region again. No one knows what other dangers the mortal world will present, with even wondrous spell High Holiness skilled. This issue is important, don't tell anyone about it. The middle-aged man said in a low voice, it's an extraordinary issue that seems to concern an ultimate treasure in the mortal world. What did you say? The young man waved his hands in boredom. I have no interest in these things. Then, he returned his attention to the games on his device. The middle-aged man asked curiously, what's in your hands? This is a small gadget popular lately in Thousand Lantern Immortal Market. The young man with the surname of Gui said with great interest, it's quite interesting and seems to understand our language. He said to the communication jade, power off. The game was turned off shortly as the communication jade dimmed. Look, this is called artificial artifact intelligence which can execute some simple commands. Meanwhile, in the UI Taoist Alliance in Darjin at the distant continent of Immortal Relic Dash. In a room full of circulating light of spiritual artifacts, Nalan Minksu gazed at the messages before her in concentration. How is it going? Have you found anything useful? Sitting around her were artifact masters of UI Taoist Alliance, Miss Nalan. At this moment, Li Heran walked in and said, "You secretly connected to all the audio artifacts in the mobile devices, isn't it a bit sneaky? Besides, you didn't tell us about this important issue." Li Heran said in displeasure, "Miss Nalan, I hope that you don't bring the sneaky schemes of the big families into our research room." As messages flashed before her, Nalan Mingsu said coldly, "Now, we're in an unusual time. Besides, you've always known what kind of person I was since long ago." She shook her head indifferently and replied, "I can't change my habits." "You." Li Heran was angered by her attitude. Nalan Mingsu answered Li Heran absent-mindedly since her eyes were caught by one of the messages. Her expression changed as she said, "Come and look at this." At this moment, each word of the conversation in the courtyard of Gui family came to their ears. It's said that those demons are too powerful, even the High Holiness elders don't want to battle them head-on, so, they plan to attack from the side. It was the middle-aged man's voice. What else can it mean, who doesn't have relatives and friends? It's said that profound spell High Holiness will go to the territory of the demon clan in the mortal world. At this moment, Li Heran stopped reasoning with Nalan Mingsu as his expression suddenly changed. Demon clan, Xiaoyu? Not only Xiaoyu. Nalan Mingsu put her arm on the desk and tapped her exquisite chin with her slim and long fingers while saying in speculation, "It seems like they got set back at the shop owner's hands and are planning to do something dirty." Li Heran looked grim. "What should we do then? Even though we can manage to resist these immortals, even that senior can't protect everyone. After all, our strength is limited. That senior is probably not as powerful as we think." Nalan Mingsu rubbed her temples and looked as if she was having a headache. Otherwise, he wouldn't only show his hand at the last moment each time. These rats. Li Heran gritted his teeth and said, "Not able to fight us with strength, they are resorting to these dirty methods. They defile the name of immortals." Then, they all fell silent. They use dirty and despicable methods, so what? Nalan Mingsu's tone was still mild. "History is always written by the victors. I'm sure that if the shop owner is defeated, he will be described as the #1 evil demon in the whole world in less than 100 years. As for the destruction caused by this war, it will all be blamed on this biggest evil demon," she continued. "Although I don't know why these lofty immortals keep going after this tiny mortal world, I'm sure that they are doing it to obtain huge secret benefits. Besides, they have felt that these ants have grown powerful enough to threaten them." Nalan Mingsu said, "They've felt the threat, and they certainly want to kill it in the cradle." Li Heran shrugged, "I'm only an artifact master and don't care so much. Let's inform the shop owner of these messages immediately. At this moment, Mr. Fang was still in the new shop at the East Continent, stationed about 15 kilometers away from the shop under the leadership of the Immortal Masters. These immortals sent out some elders to taunt Mr. Fang every day. Mr. Fang felt harassed by them. He didn't go out and beat them, afraid that it was their trick to draw him away, but if he did go out, these old farts ran so fast that they were gone before the 3 sky fairies could appear. Mr. Fang began to wonder if he should ask 3 sky fairies to ambush these immortals. After all, the people in investiture of the gods always fought fairly and didn't use any dirty tricks. At this moment, he received a message from Nalan Mingsu, "Be careful. They are just doing it to pull your attention while their real targets are the Demon Clan, Elf Forest, Heavenly Academy, Liuyan Taoist Palace, etc." Mr. Fang replied immediately, "They are playing dirty? I'm afraid so." Soon, he received another message from her, "What's your plan?" With half city fighting the plane of ninefold darkness, the West Continent fighting the godly realm, and the East Continent fighting the immortal realm, you're fighting on 3 fronts. They know that you can't split forces to other places and have almost reached the limit. Nalan Mingsu added, "Their intention is to further split your force." There was a while of silence. Fang Chi looked at the advanced carrier rock in his hand. The condition for using the carrier rock was that he must reach 10% synchronization rate with the characters in the cultivation room. The 3 sky fairies were his limit now. At this moment, the sect masters were beyond his reach. Of the 5 advanced carrier rocks, he had used 4 to summon Yang Jian, Kongxun, the 10 heavenly masters, and 3 sky fairies respectively. Now, only 1 rock was left. There was only 1 carrier rock, but it must block enemies in many places. Remembering his joke of fighting 3 realms, he felt like it was ridiculous. I can't get out of it now. However, what else could he do anyway? Almost everyone knew that he had an ultimate treasure and wanted to take it from him by force. If you can't find a solution, Nalan Mingsu seemed to be stating a fact, I suggest you make a choice and give up some people. No, Mr. Fang replied. What can you do then? At this moment, he thought of someone. Haven't you heard that only kids do multiple choice questions? Mr. Fang reached out his hand and said, I want them all. Nalan Mingsu was at a loss for words. Meanwhile, after taking several ultimate treasures that had guarded the Saint Emperor place for countless years, Profound Spell High Holiness was walking down the Saint Emperor mountain with great smugness. If this trip is successful. While riding on colorful clouds, he led some elders to cross the vast ocean and traveled toward the demon-slaying platform. On the way, they suddenly saw a bright light beam lightly landing on a high mountain and illuminating a large territory. It turned the sun and created many clouds. These immortals were surprised and said, how come I've never seen this mountain before? Lowering the clouds, these immortals entered the mountain curiously and clicked their tongues at the wonders they saw. It was indeed a great immortal mountain with evergreen pine trees and boulders that had existed for tens of thousands of years. I wonder which mountainous immortal lives here. They were about to venture deeper in when a voice came from behind. Taoist friends, please wait! Exclamation mark. Who is it? TL note, FBI liked this chapter. Chapter 933, Shengongbao instigates Profound Spell High Holiness defection. Despite his surprise, Profound Spell High Holiness wasn't alarmed with his hands resting on his belt. After all, he had quite a few spiritual treasures that were even more powerful than the Saint's spiritual gold stamp. To ensure that they could hit Fang Chi's weaknesses without error, the Immortal Masters had given several excellent spiritual treasures to these elders. With these spiritual treasures, he was sure that few people in this world could harm him. Therefore, regardless of the stranger's cultivation strength, Profound Spell High Holiness looked back with great confidence, thinking, Humphrey, if he dares to show any ill intentions, I'll test my new spiritual treasures on him. He turned around and saw it was a Taoist riding on a tiger. Profound Spell High Holiness said cautiously, Taoist friend, who are you? Where are you from? The Taoist said with a smile, I'm Shengongbao from the Kunlun faction. Kunlun? Profound Spell High Holiness thought for a long while but couldn't remember a place called Kunlun. Thinking of the countless hermits in the innumerable immortal sea, he thought it wasn't strange that he didn't know about this place. Perhaps it's a name that these mountainous immortals gave for the place, and it's natural that I don't know about it. Taoist friend Shen? Lately, the 8 immortal families had been recruiting masters with rare abilities from everywhere, and Profound Spell High Holiness showed his habitual benign face and said, I wonder what business you have here. Taoist friend? Shengongbao said, I came especially for you. Taoist friend, for me? Profound Spell High Holiness was even more confused. I've never met you before. However, at second thought, he realized that even though he didn't know this immortal, the latter might know him, the famous Profound Spell High Holiness from the immortal Gui family. He immediately corrected himself and said, what can I do for you? Taoist friend. He wasn't worried that this immortal was here to block him. After all, with these powerful ultimate treasures with him, even 100 such independent immortals were not his match. Then, he heard Shengongbao speak while laughing. I heard that you and other members of immortal families encountered some difficulties when you went down to the lower region to kill demons. Now you have returned to the Saint Emperor Palace to fetch spiritual treasures and are on the way to the mortal world and fight the demons. Is it true?" Despite the secrecy of his mission, Profound Spell High Holiness knew that he couldn't hide the fact that he had returned to the Saint Emperor Palace. He thought this stranger only knew about his trip to fetch the treasures and not his true intentions. Therefore, he nodded and said, "Yes." Shengongbao continued, "After the deaths of the spirit generals and several of your good friends, you still don't understand the situation and will go down to the lower region so recklessly? Have you discovered the background of those immortals and the treasures?" Profound Spell High Holiness shook his head. "Isn't it Sect Master Tongchen? I think he's just a hermit from innumerable immortal sea, and he just gave himself the name of Tongchen." Shengongbao said with a smile, "This is a big issue. Throughout history, did anyone do such important missions without planning it first?" Profound Spell High Holiness thought for a moment and shook his head while replying, "No." "Why are you acting so recklessly then?" Shengongbao asked again. Profound Spell High Holiness said, "The Immortal Masters have made the plan. Daoist friend, you don't need to worry about it." He thought, "You don't know my true purpose. I don't need to waste my time on you." Shengongbao said, "I heard that the spirit generals had all been confident of themselves before they died, before those high holinesses were killed. They also thought that they would obtain victory without question. Now, Taoist friend, you act so recklessly without knowing the dangers that are awaiting you. Aren't you following your dead friend's footsteps?" Hearing these words, Profound Spell High Holiness's expression changed a bit. Shengongbao said solemnly, "According to my observation, you're not a reckless person. Who instigated you to do this? They are evil." This Profound Spell High Holiness's expression changed again as he said, "I'm not reckless. In fact, even the Immortal Masters haven't gotten to the bottom of this issue." Shengongbao said with a smile, "Yes, even the Immortal Masters didn't get to the bottom of it, but they want you to venture into the depths of it. Aren't they asking you to die without even knowing the situation?" Hearing his words, Profound Spell High Holiness began to sweat as he considered the situation carefully. "The water in the pond is so deep that even Immortal Masters can't get to the bottom of it. But I'm only a High Holiness elder. But we intend to launch sneak attacks this time instead of fighting head-on. How can there be dangers?" At this moment, he saw Shengongbao move his fingers, looking as if he was doing some calculations. Startled, Profound Spell High Holiness immediately remembered that those Immortal Masters could also calculate with divination. If they couldn't find the answer but this Immortal can, does it mean that this stranger's skills at divination are higher than those Immortal Masters? If they could find the answer but had concealed the results from me, it would be more meaningful. He thought for a while, and Shengongbao saw sweat popping out on his forehead. Then, Profound Spell High Holiness asked in alarm, "Taoist friend, do you have a solution? Please tell me." Shengongbao shook his head and said, "I don't know your mission. Since it concerns the Immortal Masters, I don't dare to ask." "It's okay." Profound Spell High Holiness felt as if he was facing a huge unknown black hole that even the Immortal Masters didn't understand. If he ventured into it without a plan, he might follow the path of wondrous Spell High Holiness. After all, those dead people's souls hadn't returned yet. If their souls survived, they could still reincarnate. But if the souls were gone? He shivered at the thought. Hearing Shengongbao's words, he seemed to see a lifeline in an ocean as he was drowning. "I can only explain it briefly to you and won't say anything important. Taoist friend, you have a meticulous mind. Can you give me some advice?" Then, he explained the plan briefly. Shengongbao's expression turned grim after hearing his words. Seeing his expression, Profound Spell High Holiness looked even more anxious. He quickly asked, "Taoist friend, what do you think?" Shengongbao said, "Taoist friend, you'll be in big trouble. How come you are still not aware of it? What do you mean? Profound Spell High Holiness thought that even if he failed the mission, he could still flee with the help of these spiritual treasures. How come I'm in big trouble? Shengongbao said, let's not talk about if you'll succeed or not. Taoist friend, have you ever considered what would happen if you succeeded? If I succeeded? Profound Spell High Holiness said in puzzlement, of course, I'll be rewarded by the immortal masters. What do you think? Shengongbao said, this is when the real trouble comes, Taoist. After you threaten that figure with the lives of his friends and relatives, will that person hate your guts? Profound Spell High Holiness laughed, of course, but he will be turned into a fierce ghost. I'll beat his soul out with one palm strike. Taoist friend, don't you understand? Shengongbao said, I think perhaps it's you who will become a fierce ghost. Me? Profound Spell High Holiness froze. Why? If you're successful, that figure in the mortal world will hate you so much that he'd want to die with you. If he is willing to hand over the ultimate treasure at the price of your life, what would you do then? Profound Spell High Holiness's heart lurched, feeling stupefied. He had considered it carefully, but he still hadn't thought of this move. If so, Profound Spell High Holiness sighed heavily, I'm in danger. If you fail, then it means that the lower region conceal extreme dangers. Taoist friend, you might not end up better than your dead friends, I guess. Profound Spell High Holiness instantly turned ashen-faced and said in horror, you mean, I'll die both ways? Chapter 934, Break the Array? Shocked and furious, Profound Spell High Holiness pointed at the sky and cursed, old farts, you're despicable. I've cultivated for countless years at the same Tempera mountain and obtained countless merits, but you beastards treat me like this. You are sending me to die for that treasure? Fortune and disaster are closely related, Shengongbao said. Whenever a treasure is about to come out, everyone in the world are faced with tribulations. There are people who obtain the treasure, and there are naturally people who are killed by the tribulations. Profound Spell High Holiness remembered that each time when a treasure came out, it had always caused a bloody catastrophe and the deaths of countless immortals. Considering the words that the Taoist named Shengongbao had said, he instantly felt that this immortal was intelligent and mysterious. Then, do you mean that I'm the one being killed by the tribulation? Not necessarily, Shengongbao said, only some people want you to be the one who needs to go through the tribulation. Taoist friend, don't worry, I'm here to help you handle this tribulation. Hearing his words, Profound Spell High Holiness was elated. What's your plan? I have two plans, one is so-so while the other is better. Hear me out, Shengongbao said. Taoist friend, if you follow the so-so plan, you can stay out of all this by hiding in a place, letting the gods, immortals, mortals, and ghosts turn the world upside down with wars. But if you do this, you can't come out ever again, otherwise, you'll get killed. Then, what's the better plan? Profound Spell High Holiness asked again. Working with the mortal world, Shengongbao said. What? Profound Spell High Holiness was instantly displeased and said, how can these mortals defeat the innumerable immortals? See, if I work with them, won't I also get killed one day? Shengongbao said with a smile, Taoist friend, didn't you say that you couldn't get to the bottom of the issue of the mortal world? Why don't you take this opportunity to enter their camp and find out the real power that they have? If they really can't defeat the innumerable immortal sea, with your power, isn't it a piece of cake to run? With these spiritual treasures in your hand, won't you live a great life anywhere you want? You're right, Taoist friend. Extremely delighted, Profound Spell High Holiness said, now that the ultimate treasures I took from the Saint Tempera Palace are mine to use, the least that I can do is finding an immortal abode to understand the mysteries contained in them and cultivate diligently, regardless of how fierce they are. No one can mess with me after my cultivation strength grows to a higher level. If that place has powers that I don't know right now and defeats the innumerable immortal sea, You can take the position of the biggest hero with these ultimate treasures. Shen Gongbao said, isn't it a better life than being a chess piece under others' manipulation? Understanding dawned on profound spell High Holiness. Thanks for your advice. My deadly situation is now totally reversed. Then, he said farewell to Shen Gongbao and went to help the Origins Internet Club with all the ultimate treasures that he had taken from the Saint Emperor Palace. Shortly, another Taoist dressed in green clothes was flying toward the demon-slaying platform with his sleeves flapping in the winds. He was vast spell High Holiness. With a glowing face, he was feeling very good after taking some spiritual treasures from innumerable tribulation Immortal Palace. I'm impatient to see the faces of those ignorant and arrogant mortals when the time comes. Ha 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 ha. He burst out laughing. With these spiritual treasures, who in the mortal world could block him? Suddenly, he saw an immortal mountain before him, with steep cliffs. The mountain had all kinds of immortal beasts wandering through the deep forests. As he was enjoying the scenery in fascination, a voice came from behind him. Taoist friend, please wait. Who is it? He looked back abruptly. Looking around, he saw a Taoist flying over from the distant sky while riding on a tiger. He looked at the Taoist curiously. Where are you from? Taoist friend. 3 minutes later, with the spiritual treasures from innumerable tribulation Immortal Palace, the old man who was wearing a wide green robe descended to the lower region to help the Origins Internet Club, looking arrogant and aggressive. At the demon-slaying platform, a Taoist dressed in a yellow robe was about to descend. He was vital spell High Holiness. With ultimate treasures from Avadio Immortal Palace, he was about to descend to deal with the ordinary and powerless mortals. He said with a chuckle, the Immortal Masters are too cautious. I can accomplish this mission with my own power. I'm afraid that I'll have no chance to use these spiritual treasures. He had taken 2 steps forward when a voice came from behind him. Taoist friend, please wait. With a shiver, he put his hand on the spiritual treasures hanging at his belt. Subconsciously, he would attack without hesitation if any danger appeared. He looked back immediately. Who is it? I'm Shen Gongbao from the Kunlun faction. A Taoist came out riding on a tiger. Vital spell High Holiness chuckled. It is just a mountainous Taoist. I'm being paranoid. I'm still in the immortal realm. What's there to be afraid of? He chuckled in his mind. Even if he's an enemy, with his low cultivation strength, he's no match for my spiritual treasures. He walked over and asked, Taoist friend, what's going on? Less than 5 minutes later, a ferocious Taoist dressed in a yellow robe aggressively descended to the lower region to help the Origins Internet Club with the ultimate treasures that he had gotten from Avadio Immortal Palace in his pockets. At this moment, the 3 Immortal Masters, Dragon Pool, Innumerable Tribulations, and Avadio, and the Immortal troops were stationed dozens of kilometers away from the new shop at the East Continent. In the campsite, Avadio Immortal Taoist moved his fingers and did some calculations. It has been days since Profound Spell, Vast Spell, and Vital Spell went to do the mission. They should be back any moment now. They should. Dragon Pool Immortal Master said, we've done enough stalling with that kid. If we continue doing it, I'm afraid that he will see our true intentions. Innumerable Tribulations Immortal Master laughed and said with a nod, I can feel the presences of Profound, Vast, and Vital. Let's go. I'll teach this evil being a good lesson for making me stay in the lower region for so long. He slammed his hand on the handle of his chair and stood up with an aggressive expression. With murderous spirit in his eyes, he gazed at the distance. It seems like we have a good show to watch today. Avadio Immortal Master walked out of the tent while laughing. Hear my command, troops. Follow me and destroy the demons in the mortal world. Yes. The thunderous yells shook the heavens and earth. The sky above Mr. Fang's shop had gradually calmed down, but now dark clouds gathered and swept across the sky. Shouts and yells rose from the ocean of clouds and shook the sky. Mr. Fang walked out of the shop, looked up at the sky and saying, "What, you've come up with a way to break the array today?" "Yes." Dragonpool Immortal Master sneered, "Today, I'll show you how this array is broken without us doing anything." Before them, the 600 cultivators and warriors instantly built the array outside the shop. Yellow winds swept across the space and blocked the sun and sky. It was the 9-turn Yellow River array. Sitting in the array, the 3 sky fairies waited for them to try and break the array. The 3 immortal masters sat in their carriages while other immortals flanked them on both sides, showcasing the former's extremely noble positions. With a wave of his arm, one of the immortal masters yelled, "Vast spell, vital spell, and profound spell, where are you? Why don't you hurry up and help us break this array?" Chapter 935, Saint Patriarch showing up. You have no idea what kind of existences are behind us. Vast spell, vital spell, and profound spell, why aren't you coming out and helping us break this array? Dragonpool Immortal Master yelled. Old bastards. At this moment, light from treasures flashed below as the ultimate treasures from the Saint Emperor Palace, Innumerable Tribulation Immortal Palace, and Avagir Immortal Palace lit up and crashed toward the Immortal Masters' heads. Old farts, die. Before they could understand what was happening, the 3 immortal masters were instantly devoured by a big wave of spiritual light. They all looked disheveled when they got out, looking at vast spell, vital spell, and profound spell as if they were ghosts. The immortal masters said, What has happened to these 3? Regardless of how hard they thought, they couldn't understand the situation. The 3 immortal elders had been sent to fetch treasures in the immortal realm and travel back to the mortal world. How come in the blink of an eye, they are attacking us with the spiritual treasures that we gave them? Could it be? The 3 immortal masters exchanged a look and felt extremely weird. Perhaps this ultimate treasure can even bewitch people? While they were wondering, a golden light shot out from the horizon. The golden light swept toward them, intending to engulf them. Horrified, the 3 immortal masters launched several spiritual treasures which were all ultimate immortal treasures that had been in their precious collection for countless years. However, under the golden light released from the gold dipper, these treasures had all been instantly sucked away like straws in a tornado. What the heck is this treasure? When profound spell high holiness and other high holinesses lost their treasures earlier, it was blamed on their unfamiliarity with the control of those spiritual treasures, but now, even their best treasures couldn't withstand that golden light for one moment before falling into the gold dipper. The 3 immortal masters had thought that the 3 fairies could at most break even with them with this spiritual treasure, just like how Luia Taoist Immortal had boasted of his own strength in front of the Yellow River array after the 12 golden immortals were captured. Realization only dawned on them after everything already took place. No. Dragonpool Immortal Master yelled, the power of this treasure is far greater than we expected. Almost instantly, Avagir Immortal Master's expression changed drastically. Dragonpool Immortal Master shook his hand, and a turbid yellow ancient scroll spread out. Instantly, the scroll blocked the sky and the sun as well as the great golden light from the Chaos Essence Golden Dipper for 1 second. Immediately, the 3 of them turned into 3 colorful light beams and fled. From the direction of the colorful light beams in the distance, a voice said with shock and fury, Hurry! Hurry up and enlist the help of Saint Patriarch. Bastards, don't run. With a crisp yell, Green Sky Fairy immediately followed them. Then, the other 2 Sky Fairies chased after them with strong murderous spirits. The 3 immortal masters had stayed before the array for a long time but only sent elders to test the waters without revealing themselves. Now that they finally got a chance to capture these 3, the 3 Sky Fairies wouldn't let this opportunity escape. With the light of the golden scissors before them, the 3 flew up in clouds while riding on their mounts in the blink of an eye. Don't let them go. Mr. Fang's face darkened. The 3 immortals are evil, we can't let them go. He immediately chased after them. chasing after the three immortal masters. The three sky fairies went through the barrier between the immortal realm and the mortal world and crossed the innumerable immortal sea, chased by the golden dragon Scissors and the chaos essence golden dipper. The three immortal masters fled frantically to an unknown place. In the distance, they seemed to see a tall immortal mountain with immortal clouds floating around it. Without thinking, the three immortal masters shot into the immortal mountain frantically. "Older sister, let's follow them." Green Sky Fairy yelled and chased after them. Coming after them, Fang Chi looked at the immortal mountain. After a moment of consideration, he also shot into the mountain, following them closely. In the mountain, the peaks and green forests stood like strange barriers as birds and beasts ran through them. The three immortal masters landed on the mountain and walked down a mountainous path. The moment that Fang Chi entered the mountain, a strange force pulled him down from the sky. He saw a stone table on one side of the path before him. Sitting across to each other at the stone table were two old men, one in a purple robe and the other in a yellow robe. They were engrossed in playing chess and seemed oblivious of the three sky fairies and Fang Chi. They blocked the path with mild expressions. The Taoist wearing the yellow silk robe and hemp shoes with his hair pulled up in a Taoist bun slightly looked up and glanced at the three sky fairies and Fang Chi casually. "Who are you? How dare you block our way?" With cold expressions, the three sky fairies demanded. The yellow-robed Taoist sized up the three sky fairies and Fang Chi coldly and yelled in a harsh tone, "Evil beings! How dare you act so atrociously at Wild Tribulation Summit?" The purple-robed Taoist glanced at them coldly. "Who are your masters? Maybe I know them. Even your masters wouldn't dare to act arrogantly on this mountain. The juniors nowadays are getting more and more unruly. Who are you?" Cloud Sky Fairy asked. "Older sister, don't waste your breath on them." Green Sky Fairy said, "Since they are blocking us, they must be accomplices of those three immortal masters. Let's use the golden dragon Scissors and chaos essence golden dipper and give them a taste of our power." When she said those words, the two old men didn't move a muscle. Instead, they sneered. Then, a golden light of scissors cut toward the yellow-robed Taoist. Before it came close, it was sent to one side by an invisible force. The golden dragon Scissors couldn't harm a hair of his. Then, the three sky fairies launched the chaos essence golden dipper. Before its golden light got close, the yellow-robed Taoist brushed it aside with his wide sleeve. Only at this moment did the three immortal masters stick their heads out of behind the strange-shaped boulder. Walking out from behind the boulder, they said with great respect, "To Saint Patriarchs, we were hunted down by them and didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive us." The yellow-robed Taoist waved at them and then looked at Fang Chi and his companions. "You hunted down immortal masters of our clan and even tried to commit murder on Wild Tribulation Summit. You're audacious." Fang Chi couldn't sense any presence from these two old men, and that made them feel like bottomless abysses. Fang Chi didn't dare to make any careless moves. He had only felt this way with only one kind of people. They might represent the unreachable summit of this world. Standing before such existences, even Fang Chi felt a sense of fear instinctively. "Are you afraid now?" Innumerable Tribulation Immortal Master said with a sneer. "Do you understand now? You were doomed to fail from the very beginning." He looked at Fang Chi and his companions as if they were dead people. "People all think that us, the immortal masters who rule the immortal families, are the most powerful existences in the innumerable immortal sea, but it's a ridiculous misunderstanding. Defeating us means nothing. You have no idea what kind of existences are behind us. Now, do you understand?" Chapter 936. One essence turns into three pure ones. The final battle is about to begin. "Afraid, Saint Patriarch?" After a long while, Fang Chi said with an indifferent smile, "Perhaps." Dragon Pool Immortal Master's face darkened. "Have you been driven crazy by fear? I'm afraid that with such immortals and gods like you, how can this world have peace? As the heavens has lost order, the land is destroyed, and the sky is shattered. The world is on the brink of collapse. Have you guys ever experienced the suffering in the mortal world? Have you ever tried to stop the collapse of heaven and restore the order of heaven and earth? You sealed the void and stopped mortals from obtaining Tao. In the passage of time, tens of thousands of Tao pursuers had ended their lives with regret. Fang Qi pointed at the mortal world below them and said, "Have you heard the sad weeping and furious roars of the heroes who couldn't realize their great dreams in the past tens of thousands of years? The mortals worship you by burning incense sticks and holding sacrificial ceremonies. Do you deserve their worship in the past tens of thousands of years?" "No," Fang Qi said with a snicker. "How could you call yourselves immortal or sages? What did you do to deserve the title of immortals and sages? Who gave you the right to call yourselves immortals and sages? I live a lawful life in the mortal world, but you threaten my life again and again. Now you dare to accuse me of acting atrociously and behaving recklessly? Ridiculous." The yellow-robed Taoist was so furious that he laughed and said, "We were born with the heaven and earth, bear the fortune that equal to heaven and share the Tao essence of the heaven and earth. Born as the masters of heaven and earth, our words are heavenly laws. You mortals broke the heavenly laws and will be punished with the death penalty. You even dare to break into the Wild Tribulation Summit and try to kill these immortal masters." The Taoist said with a ferocious sneer, "Evil being, you even dare to lecture us. Don't waste your breath on him," the other Taoist said. Then, the yellow-robed Taoist waved his big sleeve, and the heavens and earth, as well as the sun and moon, seemed to change positions. An extremely horrifying force crashed toward Fang Qi and the three sky fairies. Even the three sky fairies turned pale, let alone Fang Qi, who felt as if all his bones and meridians would break under this huge force. It felt as if the entire heaven and earth had received some order and were pressing down on Fang Qi from all directions with a vicious force. Dragonpool Immortal Master and the other Immortal Masters sneered at this sight. They seemed to have foreseen this ending long ago. "It reminds me of something." At this moment, Dragonpool Immortal Master said with a snicker, "Among the mortals, there was once a figure in the primeval time who taught these ignorant creatures the art of language and essence cultivation. Some even achieved a cultivation strength that could rival that of an immoral. After the transformation of the heaven and earth, they ascended to the immortal realm and had the honor to temper immortal physiques. Some members of other races even became gods as well, and they were worshipped by their clansmen for tens of thousands of years. But," Dragonpool Immortal Master said coldly, "unfortunately, they only taught a group of wastrels. In our eyes, ants are just ants. The scum don't even have the right to be cannon fodder. Those who didn't die on the battleground are all respectful to our families. You're immortals who have just obtained your immortal physiques. If you think that you can now mess with our patriarch, that is ridiculous. You're just human immortals. Even after you cultivate for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or even 10 million years, you are still no match for us. This is the mandate of heaven. Today, you evil creatures will get the chance to see our power and the gap between you and us. When your souls are scattered, you'll die without regret." The yellow-robed Taoist waved his sleeve, and the force turned heavier and was about to shatter everyone into dust at any moment. At this moment, Fang Qi must use his last trump card, which was the godly summon rock that he had obtained. Although it had a restriction on the level of characters that it could summon, it was different from the carrier rocks since it didn't need synchronization rate. There was only one such rock. These items were extremely precious as they were all created by the system energy. Suddenly, clouds opened, and the mist disappeared in the sky. A wave of pure light covered the sky while auspicious colorful clouds danced in it. Almost at the same time, the heaven and earth cleared up as the heavy pressure suppressing Fang Qi and the three sky fairies instantly vanished. "Who is blocking me?" The yellow-robed Taoist remained in his attack posture, but the force had vanished long ago. Looking up at the sky, he saw a Taoist coming over while riding on the black ox. Meanwhile, all of the glamorous light in the heavens and earth went away as a pure light shot up into the sky. "Who are you?" No one, including the immortal masters, had imagined that someone could block the attack from this Saint Patriarch, breaking the chaos and revealing the heaven and earth. He established 5 elements in the mortal world, guiding Xuanhuan to immortality. He showed power at Han Fortress with Tao that is eternal. Lozi sang the poem, I'm the Ren Sect Master, Lozi, Li. I heard you say that all immortals who were once mortals are ants? Lozi said with a smile, ever since Banga separated the heaven from the earth, I've merged my body with the heaven and created the 3 pure ones with one streak of pure essence. After being the master of Ren Sect for so long, I've never heard of the things that you just mentioned. Today, I'll see if I, with my human origin, will look like an ant in your eyes too. What Ren Sect? Are you in charge of a group of evil monkeys? The Cloud Sky Fairy and her sisters said in a hurry, Greetings, Uncle Master. Lozi nodded and said with a snort, These ignorant animals are audacious. Hurry up and attack. The Saint Patriarch of the 8 major immortal families were not ordinary immortals. At this moment, winds howled as the universe shook, lightning bolts showered down like raindrops, shaking the mountains and rivers. As the yellow-robed Taoist circulated his spiritual energy, lightning snakes lit up the sky and the land while murderous spirit filled the 9th heaven. On the other side, an exquisite pagoda rose from the top of Lozi's head with clouds and settled the universe. The yellow-robed Taoist's face turned cold. Although he hadn't used all his strength yet, he couldn't inflict any damage on the immortal before him. Xuanhuan Saint Master, I'll help you. At this moment, the other Saint Master entered the fray, attacking Lozi from the other side. This evil being is powerful. The Taoist yelled, Let's see if you can fight both of us. Why not? At this moment, Lozi split into 3 as colorful light beams rose high into the sky with dazzling radiance. Lozi had split into 3 forms. Being old before heaven was formed, yet I was born after heaven. I obtained the form and my name through the Li family. I learned and cultivated under Hongjun, so I can turn one essence into the 3 pure ones. Lozi sang the words and said with a smile, Even if a pearl is as tiny as a grain, it will still be radiant. Even if 2 more come, I can fight 4 of you at the same time. At this moment, Xuanhuan Saint Master was almost dazed by the scene, and the 3 immortal masters shivered uncontrollably. The 2 lofty Saint Masters are being suppressed by only 1 immortal right in front of us. They exchanged a look of horror. Who the heck is this being? This scene almost turned every idea that they had formed in their heads in the past tens of thousands of years upside down. More horrifying was that an extremely giant Tai-Kai pattern rose in the sky, blocking the sky and the sun. It was coming down from the sky toward them. There was no exit for them, either on the land or in the sky. Go. At this moment, seeing the Tai-Kai pattern coming toward them, even the 2 Saint Masters of the immortal families were horrified and fled immediately. In the next moment, the 3 immortal masters fell into the Tai-Kai pattern and were instantly turned into dust. Their souls went directly toward the god's investiture platform. On this day, 3 realms experienced huge quakes. As the most powerful existences in the 3 realms, their lives, which had lasted for countless years, and their permanent reign were severely threatened now. None of them could sit back and wait to be butchered. In a permanent godly palace above the heaven, a pair of permanent eyes slowly opened. It gazed at the place below the bottomless abyss. Even such a lofty existence had a grim look in its eyes. How about? A voice came from the abyss. Let's join hands. Where's the ferocious godly army? A voice seemed to fall from the top of heaven. In the distant battleground of gods and demons, many withered corpses and remains crawled out from the deep underground of the desolate battleground. They seemed to have been buried in the ground for countless years. Some were thin and dry and could only be recognized as elves from their long ears. Some were big orcs with broken armor. There were countless cultivators and warriors who raised their long swords high. They roared with defiance as their faces turned toward the sky, looking as vivid as when they were alive. In the ruins, The broken walls and buildings seemed to be telling their glorious past and the stories that had been buried in dust long ago. Now, they were only shells and corpses that were being controlled like the living dead. Wearing a set of shattered armor, the blank eyes of the slim and tall elf suddenly lit up with green gloomy glint. In the elf forest, an exquisite figure wearing a long dress and a silver-haired senior were devotedly staring at the lake, which was as bright as a mirror. First Elder Hyru's eyes looked sad. It has been so many years. Has our god abandoned us long ago? Suddenly, a streak of dark light suddenly lit up in the lake. The elf god answered us. It had been so many years. They jumped and cheered, looking as happy as kids who had just received candies. Chapter 937, The World-Ending Tribulation. At this moment, Ancestral Master Xuanhuan and the others finally exhaled a sigh of relief after seeing that the innumerable immortal sea had drawn back their forces. They returned to their cave abode. In the ancestors' shrine, there was a new memorial tablet which had been added a few years ago. Ancestral Master. Some Taoists asked him, "You have a patriarch?" "Of course." Ancestral Master Xuanhuan said proudly, "My patriarch was once a disciple of an immortal master. He had heaven-reaching cultivation strength and ultimate talents. I heard that he later ascended to heaven and became an immortal. Now that you mention it, I remember that immortal master had the same surname as the shop owner. He laughed, seeming to be in a good mood to have the rare opportunity to talk about his past. At that time, the East Continent and the West Continent hadn't separated yet, and my patriarch even knew people from some of the other clans, such as the elves. I wonder if they met each other in the high region." Hearing his words, the other Taoists looked expectant. Suddenly, Ancestral Master, look at the tablet. They widened their eyes, seeming to have sensed a special presence from that tablet. This didn't only happen to the people on the East Continent. Races such as orcs and dwarves also experienced similar things. A series of legendary figures who had been revered and worshipped for countless generations. Their presences seemed to have woken up, even in the Liuyan Taoist Palace in the continent of Immortal Relic. Palace Master, look. In the shrine, a nameless memorial tablet emitted a weak presence for no reason. Perhaps this world had forgotten them long ago, but they finally began to rekindle like cinder. But this time, the ferocious godly army has been awakened. Above the godly court, two voices said the same words. On the top of the whole world, in the palace that ruled both the gods' palace and the innumerable immortal sea. Even the immortals from innumerable immortal sea and the gods from the gods' palace were on their knees. Before them was the highest will that lorded over the whole world. The godly court seemed to be even older than this world, from the time before the world was created, from the ultimate high position. It had watched as the whole world and the long river of time moved forward. The pre-heaven gods, immortals, and sages now all shed their arrogance and defiance, looking as respectful as if they were seeing their master and lord. It was said that these pre-heaven life forms were taught by this being, so it wasn't wrong if they called him master. In this holy court, only the king that ruled the gods and the sages that led the immortals had the right to speak. These extremely powerful existences seemed to have known something or had prepared long ago. The sages and the gods lowered their heads on their knees and listened to the most ancient lord of this world. Above their heads was the vague universe, and constellations and nebulae seemed to be surging and moving in it. It wasn't a form but a will, an ultimate spiritual will that existed beyond forms. Perhaps it had appeared in many different forms, but now, it was intangible and formless. At this moment, it was silent, but everyone seemed to understand its message. Mortals will never control the heaven and earth. At this moment, immortals, gods, and demons all looked at the mortal world, which looked as small as a bead in their eyes. Murderous spirits shot out of their eyes and up into the sky. You will be destroyed in this world together with these mortals. This time, the immortals, gods, and demons would join hands and destroy the mortal world first. Things after that would depend on their own abilities. When the gods and demons were angry, heaven would fall, and the earth would be destroyed. They seemed to be telling these stupid and ignorant mortals who were the true lords of this world. In less than one day, a phenomenon that no one had thought of or dared to think of happened in the work. In the new shop at the East Continent, Jiang Xiaoyu had just stepped out when she felt the heaven and earth shaking violently. Countless rare beasts flew up from the faction in panic. In the distant mountains, countless birds were startled and flew up from the forest. What's happening? In the elf forest that was as beautiful as green jade, elf girl Sala tried to comfort an elk. The mild-tempered wild beasts had suddenly turned restless. Then, with a sad cry, the elk fled into the depths of the forest as if it had become crazy. The heaven and earth turned chilly and gloomy while all creatures became frantic. Wild gusts seemed to be playing a sad and magnificent tune for the living beings between heaven and earth. The mountains and rivers turned red as fires spread to everywhere. Perhaps this was the true catastrophe, the world-ending tribulation. The cultivators, warriors, and mages in the continent of immortal relics, the East Continent, and the West Continent seemed to feel a deep melancholy as if the whole world was weeping and howling for the imminent fate. At this moment, the elf forest was ripped apart from the middle, looking as if a beautiful piece of jade suddenly broke in half. Looking at the sky, black clouds had completely blocked the sky on this side and engulfed the whole world. Meanwhile, blinding golden light covered the other half of the sky, black and white, pure and turbid. They merged with each other beyond the heaven and formed one force. Those supreme existences' power was more than what this world could withstand, but in this battle, they stepped into this world without restraining their strength, disregarding any damage that they might inflict on the earth. This world is ridiculously fragile. A voice came from the sky. Be careful, these guys are not easy to handle, a Taoist said in a cold voice. Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master. An extremely miraculous and strange figure materialized in the black wind. Don't boost the enemy's morale and underestimate our own power. When the array appeared in the sky, it shattered the whole sky like a horrifying forbidden spell. Endless thunders howled, and horrifying black thunderbolts poured down from the dark void beyond the sky. Crack. As the sky shattered, countless black thunderbolts poured down like a black waterfall with great horror, knocking down countless mountains and cracked the land. The whole world seemed to be destroyed by this force and returned to the chaotic state at the beginning of time. This was the world where the mortals lived in. It contained all their beautiful memories, but at this moment, it seemed to come to an end. No. With wicked facial expressions, countless people raised their heads and roared in fury, looking crazy, but they could do nothing as they watched the distant sky shatter and even more horrifying disasters coming to the mortal world. They watched as the gods and demons ran rampant in the sky. Those existences who they had worshipped now brought them the most horrifying despair without moving a finger. With their eyes wide in fury, some of these mortals shouted and charged up, but they were instantly struck by lightning bolts and fires that were falling from the sky. They turned into blocks of charcoal before dropping to the ground. Chapter 938, We'll be writing our own legends, we. Elf Queen Kellybull looked at the scene before her in a daze. We'll be destroyed? Gatinian stood at the edge of the cliff inside Heavenly Academy with a walking cane and gazed at the whole world that had been plunged into the world-ending tribulation. He turned his head and looked at the naive-faced disciples thronging behind him. Outside the Geocity shop, Song Kingfeng, Xu Zixin, Nalan Mingsu, and the others who no longer looked soft and immature as well as many civilian warriors such as Liang Shi and Fu Jiang slowly raised their heads and looked up at the sky. This was the world where they lived. However, it was being cruelly trampled by others. When the innumerable immortal sea, God's palace, and ninefold darkness began to retreat, everyone thought that the worst had passed. However, no one had imagined that, Compared with the previous wars, this was the real catastrophe that was going to destroy the world. At this moment, everyone realized that they had only defeated a tiny number of these extremely powerful existences. In the previous wars, they had shown only a very small portion of their strength. Now, as their truly stunning force was revealed, everyone looked horrified. On the continents, people walked out from buildings one by one and looked up. Perhaps they had been the happiest when they were ignorant, working each day as the sun rose and resting as the sun fell. People were bound by the invisible laws of nature. They were ignorant but also were free of pain and fear. If nothing unexpected happened, perhaps the whole world would go on like this until it dissolved into nothing one day without people noticing it. The closer they got to the truth, the more they felt that the world was just an abyss of endless darkness in the ocean. Perhaps the world before them was hell. The people who tried to resist had all been destroyed. What a fragile world. I even feel like it will collapse if I put one finger on it, a voice said while sneering. It showed itself from the darkness like an evil devil that had brought endless horror to this world. With 3 heads, 8 legs, a human face, and 2 horns, it spoke the human language but was cold and inhumane. One could see the undisguised evilness from its face. The world had its dark side and bright side, and this being undoubtedly represented the deepest darkness. The sky was filled with both black and white light. Darkness and light started to merge in one place in the sky. It was a scene that no one had ever seen before. No one could remain intact before this force, since this force controlled the whole world. Once a human did the same stupid thing, and he ended up dying on this land. A heroic-looking god who was wearing golden armor and a crown gazed at the land as he sat on a huge silverish white dragon. Is this man his reincarnation? Even if he is, can he change his predestined fate? A Saint Master dressed in a purple Taoist robe gazed at the world below them coldly. That ultimate treasure has stayed in the mortal world for a long time. It seems like these mortals have obtained some of its presence. Then, we must kill them all, the evil devil said chillily. It's the ultimate fortune that has been nurtured by the heaven and earth for countless years. How can we share it with these bugs? We must take it out as a whole. Countless years had passed. An ultimate thought from that loftiest existence flashed across the minds of these gods and evil demons. It's time for harvest. Ferocious godly army? A voice seemed to come from beyond the heaven. Only one voice remained. Roar. Mind-disturbing whistles seemed to rise from their souls, and the heaven and earth seemed to merge again. As gusts howled, thick grey mist rose and engulfed the whole world. It's the elf god. In the elf kingdom, elf queen Celebel and first elder Hyru watched as the mist spread. However, the mirror-like lake looked even clearer, as if it was welcoming its creator. Perhaps the elf god has descended to the lower region. He returned to see us. Elf Queen Celebel and First Elder Hyru led the elders to walk up to welcome the god, trembling in excitement. The patriarch is coming back. In the East Continent and even the continent of immortal relics, the people in the major factions were thrilled. After all, these patriarchs were the figures who they boasted about for generations. Palace Master, look! Standing outside the ancestor shrine with other cultivators behind him, Xuanhuan stared at the strange phenomenon intently. That patriarch is the most ancient one of our Liuyan Taoist palace. With a smug face, Xuanhuan showed off his knowledge and whispered to the disciples beside him. It's said, our Liuyan Taoist palace is only a side branch of the side branch established by this patriarch. It happened everywhere in the world, such as the Orc Kingdom, the Elf Forest, and Liuyan Taoist Palace. Fog rose, and it was as chilly and gloomy as frost. A blurry and twisted figure walked over from the fog. Everyone's cheers stopped, and their excited expressions froze on their faces. Then, their faces turned wicked in horror, and they yelled with fear. What? What's this? In the Elf Royal Palace, a figure slowly walked out of the misty shadows. With half of its withered face concealed under the cape, it pulled out a rusty strange bout to the fullest and aimed it at all the elves before it. It looked exactly like the grand statue outside the royal palace. That's... First Elder Hyrule almost chocked. The godly technique, Moonfall? With a humming sound, his mind turned blank. Almost subconsciously, he lunged to one side. In the next moment, he looked back and saw several astonished elders being devoured by the white light that was shooting up into the sky. Meanwhile, an invisible force seemed to spread between heaven and earth. No. It's no longer the elf god. Elf Queen Kellybull said in a shaky voice. They were filled with despair. In this final tribulation, their god didn't bring them redemption but destruction. It happened not only in the elf forest but in the factions such as Liuyan Taoist Palace and all the kingdoms in the west continent. It felt as if a massacre had begun. That's the immortal technique, 10,000 leaf-flowing clouds. According to the legends, it's the most powerful immortal technique in the mortal world. In Liuyan Taoist Palace, the holy cultivation place full of flowers and flowing white clouds, countless disciples who had been anticipating the descent of their patriarch were plunged into a shower of blood. Screams and howls rose in waves. They still looked astonished since none of them had anticipated such a thing. What they saw was the fate of the losers. Perhaps one day, they would become like this too. While they were worshipped by the future generations, they already became puppets and butcher knives of other beings and would slash cold blades at their descendants. Chapter 939, We'll be writing our own legends, too. It's time for us to attack. The whole sky was divided into three colors, purple, golden, and red. The black and red almost occupied half of the sky. Perhaps it was no longer a war. The evil demon with 3 heads and 8 legs waved its hand and controlled one part of the world by force. A destructive and colorful light beam crashed down with a long fiery tail like a comet smashing toward the sun, turning the entire heaven and earth red. Some people even suspected that the whole land would be destroyed by this horrifying attack. A young man flew up below the comet-like light and was instantly engulfed by it. This was the ultimatum of destruction launched by the 3 most powerful civilizations in this era. 8 Saint Masters, 10 of the most ancient pre-heaven gods, and 12 primeval devil gods. They stood in different directions on the top of the sky and watched coldly as the humans struggled and died before their weak presences gathered in one place between the heaven and earth. Is this our fate? Will we face the destruction this way? What should we do? In the whole world, mortals, cultivators, and warriors found countless voices talking inside their minds. Endless negative emotions filled their minds as chills ran down their bodies. This was the real state that they were in. Origin plan, activate. A voice seemed to come from the distant ancient time. The chilly murderous spirit reversed like torrents pouring out of the Yellow River. In Liuyan Taoist Palace, Xuanhuan paused his steps and took off his outer robe as the palace master. His eyes were full of steadiness and calmness that he had when he dealt with countless monsters far more powerful than himself. Just as we did before. In the Elf Royal Palace, Elf Queen Kellybull quickly calmed down after the initial shock. An extremely pure golden lightning bolt exploded in her hand. Now, we have surpassed you. Leaning on his walking cane, Gatinian squinted his eyes, and a surge of pure essence shot up into the sky. The remaining disciples, listen to my order, formed the array. Inside Liuyan Taoist Palace, with a thunderlight jumping in her palm, Su Tanji yelled in a cold tone. In the place of her usual laziness, a chilly heroic glint flashed in her eyes, making her look like a true immortal. Get ready. Zhongwu held a short blade, and the heaven and earth suddenly dimmed. Attack. The talented young people such as Song Qingfeng had shed their youthful softness long ago. Right now, except for those who had gone back to their factions to honor their ancestors, Everyone else from the East Continent and the West Continent had gathered together in large numbers, regardless if they were facing immortals, gods, mortals, and ghosts. A purple flying sword emitted chilly light which shook the ninth heaven. Facing the pouring enemies, tens of thousands of swords shot up into the sky from behind. Innumerable sword immortal technique. With spiritual energy floating under their feet, the paladins had holy spiritual essence flowing in their bodies. Zeal. Bestow faith. Judgment. Sword 23, destroying all 6 paths. Nalan Hongwu launched sword energies from his palm, and the sword spirits that was many times more powerful than the world-destroying sword 23 shattered an immortal like a dazzling godly light beam. Fist of the heavens. Streetleton followed closely, and his power as a paladin turned into a thick light pillar and almost pierced a huge hole in the sky. Yoru is in the past. The joint army of immortals, gods, and demons swarmed up like torrents and giant waves. However, the mortals charged head-on fearlessly. They had understood why they must raise their swords. They had no exit but no regrets either. This wasn't a catastrophe since. We'll be writing our own legends. Face the wind. Wind and fire surged up as the 2 torrents crashed into each other. Fang Chi was holding a stone tablet on which were written the words God's investiture list. At this moment, the system interface showed that he had finished the task to severely punish the previous troublemakers. He had turned the immortal masters who led that invade to dust. However, he didn't expect things to deteriorate so fast. Unlock the highest level privileges. Fang Chi looked up at the comet-like colorful light beam that would fall on his head in the next moment, and then he glanced at the extremely powerful existences whose expressions were either icy and chilly or solemn and cold. Bring it on, come and try with your full strength. A gold bridge spread out, separating heaven from the earth and the gods and demons from the mortals. It also stopped the collapse of the world below the bridge. At this moment, golden light and purple clouds shot up into the sky. It looked as if jade towers and gold palaces appeared at the top of the void. The river of heaven flowed, stars blinked brightly, shining on everywhere, and colorful phoenixes soared. Dressed in gold armor, countless strong soldiers stood tall under the flapping flags, like on a primeval scroll. The legendary names lit up one by one. Radiant light shone in the sky as figures that only existed in the legends appeared in this world. With a 7-foot red silk ribbon fluttering in the sky, a figure appeared while stepped on golden wheels with lotus flowers in his eyes. With a vertical eye between his brows, a godly general proudly looked at the heaven and earth and shot godly thunderbolts from the 9th heaven. Heavenly masters, immortals, and gods stood on the 2 sides above the clouds in the sky. Further up, a few Taoists sat or lay in the clouds while 4 swords, immortal slaying, immortal butchering, immortal trapping, and immortal exterminating, rose in the air. Then, 3 treasure-ui emitted purple misty essence as they appeared. In the distant sky, murderous spirits mixed with yellow essence. In the misty clouds, a huge axe appeared first, followed by a headless battle god. Then, a fiery bow appeared below 9 suns as a god with star-bright eyes stepped out and pulled the bow to the fullest. As the demon summoning flag waved, tens of thousands of demons bowed their heads. A pair of bright eyes suddenly opened, turning the sky as bright as day. With eyes like suns, a huge dragon flew up with a lantern in its mouth. Extremely grand, aggressive, overbearing, and ultimate presences rose in the east. At this moment, tens of thousands of gods descended, casting light on all eras. Between heaven and earth, countless gazes turned toward this miraculous phenomenon that one wouldn't see even in 10,000 tribulations. They were either envious, reverent, admiring, or completely stunned. Like the waves of a surging flood, the stunning sensation blasted at everyone's hearts again and again. This huge group of immortals and gods were at least as large as the combined army of the innumerable immortal sea, God's palace, and ninefold darkness. At this moment, This group didn't show the slightest disadvantage while battling with the three realms. In the vast sky, the immortals, gods, and demons didn't even know where these gods came from but were truly stunned by the sight. The people on the ground looked up at the sky and burst into waves of exclamations as they watched these gods fight against the combined force of the three realms. They are gods from Huaxia, divided by the Gold Bridge. Two wars began on two battlegrounds at the same time, with one in the sky and the other on the ground. Chapter 940. No regrets over entering Huaxia in this life. Wish to be born in Xuanhuan in the next lifetime. TL note: Xuanhuan is another name for Huaxia. The joint army of immortals, gods, and demons poured down like a tipping river of heaven. In the west, figures dressed in pure white mages' robes flew into the sky one by one, showering light everywhere. They were the godly judgment army led by the god of radiant light judgment. In the northeast, immortal music sounded as tens of thousands of immortals poured down from the sky while standing on the surging yellow clouds. In the southeast, demons and ghosts howled in the black clouds. Battle. No. Everyone was engaged in an extremely fierce life and death-killing tribulation. Battles were everywhere on the vast land, including Liuyan Daoist Palace, the Elf Forest, and the Orc Kingdom. In the Elf Royal Palace, the ragged cloak on the thin figure looked even more shabby as swords and magic spells struck it. In Liuyan Daoist Palace, all the disciples and elders panted heavily, and almost the whole palace had been turned into ruins as if an extremely fierce battle had just happened. In the frontal battleground covered in blood that formed rivers, people like Nalan Hongwu and Street Wilson suddenly stopped their attacks and turned to look ahead. Figures walked out from the mist either with swords or whisks. Through the mist, only silhouettes could be seen. One of them carried a huge dragon-shaped sword that was wrapped in thick and heavy chains. That's Ancestral Master Duga said in a deep voice, the patriarch of our clan, and the ancestors and senior generations of our families and factions that have declined long ago. He continued. Another two figures appeared from the mist. One held a decayed staff in its withered right hand, but the precious red stone on the top of the staff was impeccable. The other held a huge two-handed sword that as tall as one man, and the light emitting from the blade chilled people's bones. First magic saint, also. The first sword saint. Street Wilson said in a grave voice. They were the ferocious godly army. The withered figures walking out from the mist seemed to be weeping about their failure before their deaths. However, their unimaginable great power seemed to be telling their descendants the long-lost but glorious legends in the past. Their empty eye sockets showed no emotions, and they butchered everything around them like puppets. Their chilly murderous spirits swept forward like mists driven by gusts. If they still had their spiritual awareness, perhaps they would want to kill themselves, with the swords of their descendants. When the mortal's eyes met these empty eye sockets, a strange emotion seemed to be conveyed. Are you ready to shoulder the future? At this moment, Nalan Hongwu and the others seemed to hear voices from the primeval time and looked even more solemn. If you're ready, cut off my head and advance forward. In the coarse and wicked roars, countless horrifying attacks exploded from all directions. At this moment, the players showed confidence, calmness, and great power on their faces, and they also demonstrated meticulous skills and souls that stood tall in the heaven and earth. As you wish. With a smile, Nalan Hongwu shook off the blood, flesh, and dust on the blade of his longsword, betting with the knight's honor. The paladins raised their huge swords and released rainbow like holy light. It's our duty to guard our nations and citizens. On the battleground, military sabers were raised. The ancestors from the distant ancient time and the ultimately talented descendants stood facing each other in solemnity on this battleground. Charge. Instantly, saber energies, sword shadows, countless horrifying magic spells, and ultimate sword spirits engulfed the entire heaven and earth. Surrounded by the great army of the three realms, The members of the Alliance force from different traces in the mortal world looked like radiant flowers that were blooming. Sword spirits traveled all through Nalan Hongwu's body. As their sword blades collided, his sword cut into his rival's neck with only a few millimeters of advantage and great accuracy. Then, Nalan Hongwu withdrew his sword in one smooth move. Remembering the countless battles in the past, both virtual battles and battles in the real world, he thought that he might have truly reached the realm of entering micro if this realm really existed. Tink, with a blunt metal colliding noise, Centelden used parry to deflect his rival's huge sword and then almost at the same time, Omnislash. Behind him, a figure flew up. Sword Saint Wilson raised his sword and started a symphony of destruction. Build the golden light array. In the sky above Liuyan Daoist Palace, heavenly light shook as thunders resonated between the heaven and earth. Blade of the Exile. In the elf forest, extremely horrifying green energy poured out with a roar like a tsunami on this doomsday. At this moment, everyone on the battleground felt a bone-deep chill. This was the furious roar of will coming from the creatures living in the mortal world. In the short dozens or hundreds of years, they had reached a realm that their patriarchs couldn't have imagined. Some of them had even stepped into the realm of immortals and gods, with their battle skills and mindset reaching the pinnacle stage. The unyielding mortals in this world had the right to be proud. Stop them, stop them. The roars of the god of radiant light judgment and other gods and immortals resonated between the heaven and earth. Kill. At this order, many demons rose in all directions. A huge shadow engulfed the sky, and it was the Shadow Legion. All the people from the West Continent were startled as they felt this presence. World Mage Hematon said with a grim expression, "It's the evil god that they worship." However, they were no longer as weak as they had been. They had slaughtered all the gods in God of War, listened to the lecture of Tao given by a sage in Journey to the West, and watched all kinds of Tao spells in investiture of the gods. Regardless of which continent they were in now, they could look back on the hard battles in the past with confidence and arrogance. How can you block me? They had reached the same immortal realm, and their swords weren't inferior compared to their enemies, but their battle hunger was even fiercer. Was it you who sent the sects under you to destroy the factions on our continent thousands of years ago? After almost cutting off all the faction lines, you are coming again thousands of years later and bringing catastrophe to us again? Flying up on his sword, Nalan Hongwu studied the god of radiant light judgment before him. Beside him, Zhongwu, Gatinian, and other cultivators and warriors all stared at this figure with cold eyes. It was you who sent the Legion to disturb our mortal world for the last thousands of years, leaving corpses all over the land and nations ruined? On the other side, the knights and mages had fury in their eyes as they studied the evil demons before them. Holy light! Do you see that enemy? Led by Commander Elven, the paladins rode on their griffins and shot into the enemy's hearts like sharp arrows. Who the heck are you? In the sky above the golden rainbow bridge, the king of gods who was wearing a godly crown and ruled the god's palace asked solemnly. Spiritual light dispersed from Fang Chi's palm. At this moment, he felt that no matter where he was, this was the most solid rock he could lean on and obtain strength from. All the thoughts in his mind turned into one sentence: no regrets over entering Huaxia in this life, wish to be born in Zhongwu in the next lifetime. An arrow tore open the void, shot from the powerful sun-shooting bow. The godly arrow turned into a light beam and flew out. The headless battle god roared. In the next moment, the immortals, gods, and demons crashed into each other on the top of the sky. It looked as magnificent as the merge of rivers of stars. That's all you can do, kill. Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master who was in a purple robe roared. In the next moment, 4 immortal swords shot up into the sky, turning the heaven and earth into, in the distant 4 directions, ancient swords suppressed the universe as the extremely weathered ancient worlds revealed in the red lights. They were the following: immortal slaying, immortal trapping, immortal butchering, immortal exterminating. 3 treasure Jadru i.e., Tai Kai scroll, and all kinds of connate spiritual treasures crashed down from the array. Ah! A scream rose, and it was followed by the second and the third scream. Then, screams rose all over the mountains and fields. As the sword energies flashed inside the array, corpses littered everywhere, and blood turned into rivers. The immortal treasures that the enemies were proud of and their unrivaled cultivation strength seemed to be useless at this moment. Immortal slaying sword is sharp, immortal butchering sword is deadly, and red lights rose when immortal trapping sword is launched, with miraculous variations. Immortal exterminating sword makes Dalur golden, immortals soak in blood. This seemed to be the true catastrophe. These lofty existences could bring a catastrophe with a thought. They had never imagined that one day, they would become the targets of such a horrifying catastrophe. At this moment, they seemed to be facing their own doomsday. Chapter 941, The Incarnation of the Great Tao. The God's investiture list opened, causing the souls of gods and immortals to fly into it and seal them inside. Inside the immortal slaying sword array, even the saint masters, ancient gods, and demon gods got lost in the waves of chilly red light. The purple-robed saint master who was the leader of the 8 major immortal families, the king of gods who ruled all gods, the king of evil gods from the ninefold darkness who wore the bone crown and emitted horrifying and ominous presence had expressions that they never showed before. At this moment, they all turned ashen-faced. After living for countless years, they rarely had emotional fluctuations, but at this moment, an emotion named fear rose in their hearts. What should we do now? Only a few saint masters were left among the 8 major immortal families. Although they had extremely high strength and had fought in the array for a while, if the situation continued, even their pre-heaven physiques and the power of the saint masters couldn't save them. The purple-robed Xuanhuan saint master, the leader of the 8 saint masters, said with a grim expression, "Now, we only have one option, asking Master for help." Before these pre-heaven saints and primeval gods were born, there had existed ultimate existences who even these saint masters and ancient gods must look up to. These existences were probably even more ancient than this world. One of the ultimate existences had inspired the 8 immortal families and the gods from the God's Palace. According to the legends, this existence came from the chaos beyond heaven and had the most ancient power that could lord over everything. He was the lord of the godly court. The other such existence was the lord of demon gods in the plane of ninefold darkness. He was also the source of horror for all the immortals and gods. With a strange sound, all the laws of nature and the most original forces in this world were activated. As heaven and earth merged, the pure and the turbid essences were being created. In the space that was suppressed by the 4 swords that made up the immortal slaying sword array, the sword energies suddenly slowed down. The time and space inside the immortal slaying sword array seemed to be under layers of great pressures, and its movements turned slow and difficult. An ethereal light which looked as vague as the meteors in the depths of the universe transformed into a huge hand that seemed to be condensed from stars in the universe, and it entered the array. The hand was so huge that it almost blocked the entire sky in the immortal slaying sword array. Its master, the purple-robed Xuanhuan Saint Master, immediately dropped to his knees and yelled, "Master is making a move." The king of gods from God's palace looked disheveled while he fought in the array. He suddenly looked up and stopped what he had been doing at this sight. All the immortals and gods in the array stopped fighting and looked at the scene in a daze. Ever since they had consciousness, they had never seen the lord of the godly court who ruled the heavens and earth making a move in person. How stunning it was! How unimaginable it was! His first move was attacking this horrifying major array. At this moment, an extremely grand voice that sounded like the chiming at the beginning of the world came from beyond the heavens. Like a giant bell, the voice resonated through all ages. No one could imagine what horrifying existences could reveal such ultimate power with a few words. Everyone looked up and saw a spiritual figure standing in the universe with its head touching the stars. as if it stood outside of time and space. It looked down on this world coldly. It forced its way through the immortal slaying sword array and reached for Fang Qi in the array. We came at the creation of the heaven of earth just for the heart of this world and the seed of heaven and earth's fortune. This item has combined all the best resources in the heaven and earth and condensed all the essence from everything in the world. After brewing for a long time, it has come to maturity today. We have waited through thousands of tribulations, and it is all worth it. Do you think I'd allow you to ruin our plan? But in the next moment, the huge hand suddenly paused and then shattered into pieces. Who is it? A furious voice came from beyond the heaven. Standing beyond the starry sky, a figure turned from vague to solid until he completely materialized. They faced each other from distance. Immortal music floated over from beyond the heaven. Sleeping in the high ninth layer of clouds, I understood true Tao on a futon. Across the heaven and earth, I'm the Almighty Master. Panga created Tai Kai, which gave birth to Yin and Yang and then 4 directions. I passed Tao to 3 disciples, and 2 of them created the Chan sect and Ji sect. They are leaders of Tao sects, all coming from Hongjun. Who is it? Seeing this scene, all the sages of the immortal families, pre-heaven gods, and demon gods from the plane of ninefold darkness's minds turned blank as if their heads would explode in the next moment. How could such a figure exist in this heaven and earth? What should we do now? Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master and the other Saint Masters felt chills running down their bodies. Hurry, help me take the ultimate holy power of fortune. Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master rolled his eyes and said, then, with the force of the entire heaven and earth, we can melt and destroy anyone. But Xuanhuan Saint Master beside him said with worry, where the heck is this ultimate holy item of fortune? Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master seemed to be recalling some past events. After we were born, this world has evolved continuously. In the core of this world and the depths of the land, the essence of everything in this world and the best resources gathered and nurtured a spirit. After a long time, we subdued it with our master and found that it contained endless great Tao, which means it's our destiny to take charge of the great Tao and control the heaven and earth. Unfortunately, the godly item had a spirit. Its spirit escaped, so we chased it and shattered it. While we fought over it with the demon gods from the plane of ninefold darkness, it disappeared into the mortal world. The shattered soul pieces scattered in the world and spread some of the presence of fortune to the mortals, which makes it extremely hard to detect its whereabouts. Only after we truly refine it can we truly control this world. Xuanhuan's Hong said grimly, according to our calculations, this item should have revealed its true form to the world by now. But why? He stared at Fang Qi without blinking. Why doesn't this person show any sign of it? If it reincarnated and was born in the mortal world with a human form. Xuanhuan Saint Master stared at Fang Qi in the array and said, regardless of how well he hides it, he should have revealed some signs of it by now. Xuanhuan Saint Master asked, if it took the human form, how can we recognize it? It's hard to recognize, but due to its special physique, most of the energy it took in will automatically heal its damaged soul, which means that, regardless of how high its cultivation strength is, it will always feel hungry and need food. Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master said, but this brat has fought so long without wanting to eat. On the battleground in the mortal world, Jiangxi Oyu sat on the ground while panting. Then, she rubbed her tummy and looked frustrated. How come I feel especially hungry today? She took out a bottle of iced red tea bigger than her small head in a hurry and gulped it down heartily. Gulp, gulp. The 2 Saint Masters exchanged a look, and their faces had never looked so astonished before. Perhaps we were chasing after the wrong person? Question mark behind them. The last few immortal masters heard their words and looked at the young man before them. We tried to smash his shop countless times, and you are now telling us that we got the wrong person. Chapter 942, The War Ends. Gods and demons fall. Do you feel it? Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master suddenly said. That's its presence. It's right on this battleground. Xuanhuan Saint Master exclaimed, it appeared. I'm sure, I can feel it. It's been so many years, all our efforts and careful planning are for this moment. But at this moment, the gold bridge separated the heaven and earth into two worlds. Besides, they were now in the immortal slaying array, and it took all their great power to temporarily block the array. Going down to the battleground in the lower region was impossible. They looked down at the battleground where the mortals were fighting the demon gods of the plane of ninefold darkness and saw rows of knights forming an array of shields, taking the front line. As warriors charged and priests sprayed holy light, the huge army advanced step by step with great steadiness. Priests, follow and heal them. Paladins, push forward. Hoarse yells resonated all over the battlefield. On the other side, people like Nalan Hongwu, Gatinian, and Zongwu forced the god of radiant light judgment to defend frantically. Sword shadows moved like lightning bolts. With his extremely powerful sword techniques, Nalan Hongwu fought the god of radiant light judgment head-on. Countless wondrous sword techniques shot across the sky like galloping heavenly horses, but they also oozed an extraordinary steadiness. Murderous spirits dimmed the sky as Zongwu led others to hold back the judgment army from one side. Under their attacks, even the powerful god of radiant light judgment was out of breath as he scrambled to block his enemies. These mortals seemed to have drained all their strength. They moved as if they had rehearsed the tactics and calculated the steps countless times. Their battle methods were unthinkably experienced and vicious. The troops from God's place, ninefold darkness, and the 8 major immortal families were astonished to find that they were at a complete disadvantage. This was the mortal joint army that they saw. This was the first time that they were stunned by a group of enemies, a group of ants. These mortals were indeed inferior to them in strength, but they had suppressed the joint army of immortals, gods, and demons step by step with almost zero casualties and mistakes. Everyone looked grim. So, that's it. Give it to them. They had never imagined that the war in the mortal world would come to this degree, but now these immortals, gods, and demons seemed to have made a decision and yelled as one. After experiencing countless tribulations ever since the primeval time, we can only win and can't lose this war. Kill them all. Chills ran down their bodies. These existences made this decision not only because of greediness. The more important reason was that they couldn't allow such enemies to live any longer. As tribulations took place, the fortune of the world showed. These beings had taken a share of the laws of nature in Tao-splitting palace. Now, they were the heavenly Tao. At least, these mortals were not their match in strength. They believed that as long as they achieved what they had planned in the past tens of thousands of years, no existences, regardless of how powerful they were, could block them. At least in this world that belonged to them, they would be absolutely unrivaled. At this moment, Jiangxi Oyu was taking a break on the edge of the battleground. Then, she thought that slacking on the side wasn't good, so she stood up and dusted off her skirt. However, she was still feeling hungry, so she took out a bag of potato chips and began fighting and eating at the same time. Huh? Why are they all staring at me? She shivered and felt chills running down her spine. The battle that the mortals were engaged in wasn't less difficult than the battle above the gold bridge. They were only mortals who had just made breakthroughs. They fought with great efforts step by step to make the scale of victory tip toward them. When they were on the brink of success and almost defeated these gods and demons with mortal strength, this sudden change almost turned all their efforts to waste. Like a tight string that was holding the world together, everything would instantly collapse if the string broke. On the battleground in the southeast, the demons from ninefold darkness looked as if they had gone berserk collectively and crashed onto the shield formations regardless of their lives. They charged repeatedly like black surging torrents until a fissure appeared. Like a big dam that was broken, the shield array cracked open, and demons poured in toward one direction. On the battleground in the west, A surge of stunning godly energy shot up and shielded the god of radiant light judgment and the soldiers around him. Then, hundreds of elite godly judgment soldiers shot up light pillars into the sky as if the will of the whole world came into their bodies, and the laws of nature protected their souls. Doomsday Judgment. With a furious yell, destructive light pillars rose between the heaven and earth and almost turned the mortal world into a horrifying hell. Where are the tanks? Shield wall, push, push. Sword Saint Wilson let out a hoarse roar and charged into the black currents by himself. Jiangxi Oyu's mind was now blank, together with people like Li Lanhuo, Mu King, and Bai from Heavenly Academy. She was surrounded by the crazy godly judgment soldiers who swarmed up like waves of a tsunami. Kill. Bai slashed her sword without stopping. Kill. Mu King's eyes were red with murderous spirit. Jiangxi Oyu's small face looked pale. However, this small team of academy disciples still couldn't see the end of their enemies even when their swords broke, and their energies were exhausted. Priests, heal. Mages, control them, hold on a bit more. Commander Elven suddenly looked back and saw his teammates fall one by one. His heart bled for them. At this moment, an extremely horrifying roar came as the strength of the huge evil god in the center of the battleground rose again. A surge of extremely evil energy turned into a black tsunami and spread out in all directions. The broken shield array at the front line was instantly knocked down and devoured. Then, the energy continued to spread to the back line. At this moment, even the ultimately powerful masters such as Sword Saint Wilson, World Mage Hematon, and Swain felt cold inside. We'll be wiped out. In the previous battles, they didn't end with death, but this time, perhaps they would truly meet their end. They looked up at the golden light above their heads. Even if the battle in the sky ended with a victory for mortals, it was meaningless since the mortal would soon be wiped out by the remaining forces of the joint army of the three realms. Facing such horrifying power, no one could save themselves. At least the mortals couldn't. Xuanhuan Saint Master and the King of God's Palace, Bright Light Godly King, heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Fang Chi in the array, they chuckled and said, "Finally, we'll triumph. You trap us in the array so we can't do huge damage to the mortal world with a wave of our hands, but it also makes it impossible for you to help them." Fang Chi looked down and shook his head. "Do you believe me if I say that they no longer need anyone's help? Every one of them is a challenger player." Before them was the devastated battleground and the destructive energy that devoured everything like a tsunami. Human strength was so tiny. Of the entire Golden Griffin Knight Legion, only Commander Elven remained standing on the battleground. No one knew what he would face, but he knew that he must do something. For the people who they guarded and the world that they loved, there were kind and peace-loving elves, fierce and strong orcs, and even the mysterious friends from the ancient East. He still remembered their boat trip on Red Leaf Lake, their aids in World of Warcraft, and their sufferings in Dark Soul. He was thankful that the world gave birth to so many lovable beings. Perhaps the heavenly Tao would change, but the land that they lived on was still their home with countless people and memories that they couldn't forget. "Paladin, do you dare to sacrifice yourself?" The ancient words for paladins resonated in his mind. Of course. He turned the blade of his huge sword and pierced his own chest. Blessing of Sacrifice. When everyone fell, Blessing of Sacrifice helped one person stand on the battleground. She waved her staff lightly, and her body turned vague and merged with holy light. Then, the pure holy light spread out like angels' wings. Figures got up from the ground one after another. At this moment, they themselves were miracles. Higher. With power that she didn't know she possessed, Jiangxi Oyu dispelled all the demons with one sword slash. The horrifying power cut all enemies into half, including all the soldiers of the joint army of gods and demons that surrounded them and the people of the East continent and the West continent. Head Nailing 7 Arrow Book. With his long white hair messily fluttering in the wind, Xuanhuan emitted intense murderous spirit. At this moment, they had discarded any considerations of life and death. They had no time for it. With the 7-star bright lamp at his feet, he shot out 2 arrows. Puh! The god of radiant light judgment spewed out a mouthful of blood. Meanwhile, the huge body of the shadow evil god was engulfed by death presence. The second arrow. Xuanhuan's ancient face almost withered instantly. Holy shield. On the other side, holy light lit up like rekindled flames. At this moment, the gods and demons all over the sky felt a bone-deep chill. With their actions, the mortals seemed to be telling these ultimate existences that they would rather die than be defeated. At this moment, they were horrified to see that a flash of sword light swept toward them. Blood dyed the entire immortal slaying sword array red. At this moment, the remaining people of the joint army of the 3 realms felt cold inside. With shock, horror, and fear on their faces, they finally realized that they were finished. Chapter 943, Huh? Where are my potato chips? The end, 1/2. It's over. At the other end of the golden bridge on the top of the sky, yin and yang merged and returned to chaos. People seemed to see an ancient but familiar starry sky and land that crashed down like a huge mountain. In the chaos, someone roared hoarsely. He fell. Even Master fell. Demon Master has also been suppressed. Run, quickly run. Not only the few remaining immortal masters but the saint masters such as Xuanhuan's Hong Saint Master were scared witless. Then, the loftiest godly court beyond the endless void and above the gods collapsed. The tens of thousands of immortals built a major array that stunned all ages. Like a millstone of heaven and earth, the array destroyed these figures that had survived countless tribulations. At this moment, they were facing the most horrifying killing tribulation that they had ever seen. Boom, boom, boom. Countless gods and demons exploded into pieces and were devoured by the red light in the array. Then, they turned silent. The gold bridge spanning the heaven and earth suddenly turned into a shower of gold dust while a golden flood swept across the entire sky. The remaining spiritual energy of those once lofty existences turned into golden spiritual rain and fell on the land. Winds brought the spiritual shower across the whole world. The deserted sea realm that had scarce spiritual essence gradually turned lively again, and the storms in the huge and desolate sea area around Half City gradually calmed down. Heavenly Abyss Sea was outside the most desolate deserted sea realm in the continent of Immortal Relic, and it was the only way leading to the spiritual state where Xuanhuan City was located. Golden spiritual rain fell in Heavenly Abyss Sea, and the strange natural phenomenon caused by the endless ancient space fissure was gradually replaced by tremendous vigor of life. It was summer. In the remote wilderness of the ultimate West Realm, the 10,000-year-old snow on the mountains melted, and new plants began to sprout at a visible speed. This place wasn't located in the polar region but seemed to have been abandoned by the sun. At this moment, vivid life returned to this area. In the elf forest, the shocking land crack began to slowly close as abundant golden spiritual essence entered the ground which was in desperate need of spiritual essence. Like a wondrous medicine, the spiritual essence healed the countless wounds that this world had been afflicted with ever since the ancient times. Concealed in the small worlds which seemed to float around the continents, including spatial fragments, ancient deserts, and withered forests, countless creatures which had been on the verge of extinction walked out and entered the world. Dead wood began to sprout, and deserts began to show refreshing greenery. This fragile world seemed to gradually get stronger. Countless fragment-like small worlds began to gather in the center. One day, they might return to their original form. From now on, the previous rulers disappeared. The 3 realms outside the mortal world would only regain order after a long time of chaos. From now on, there were only the Heavenly Clan living in the sky and the Darkness Clan living in the plane of ninefold darkness which was connected with the depths of the ocean. Meanwhile, humans had never given up on their explorations of the outside world. They explored the sky beyond the sky that had been told in many legends and seemed to gradually obtain some progress, perhaps. There was a vaster starry sky beyond this heaven and earth. A brand new era had come. At this moment in the godly court, a milky white light sphere slowly rose like a newborn sun. The laws of nature that had been split up and taken by gods now came from different directions and gathered in these ruins in the void. A small noise sounded. After countless years, a new spirit seemed to have been born. 1 year later. The shop held another worldwide esports competition. Xuanhuan and Mu Donglai sat on the caster stand. Below them were the audience stands that were filled with countless people. Today's competition had ended, and the casters and commenters began to chat with each other. Mu Donglai said, "I guess everyone has heard that we'll announce a bunch of great news after today's competition. The good news is that Xuanhuan, our long-time cloud player, will be removed from the blacklist after today's competition." Ha 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 ha. He he he. Sitting next to him, Xuanhuan laughed hysterically. Instantly, bullet comments flooded the screen. Congratulations to the long-time cloud player for being allowed to play games in the shop. Awesome. Are you going to live stream now? Obviously, Mu Donglai saw this message. In fact, I wanted to ask Xuanhuan about the first game that he'd like to play after being removed from the blacklist. Of course, I'll play Resident Evil, Diablo 2. The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1. Xuanhuan said while moving his hands. The shop has many games. Why did you choose these 3 old games? Mu Donglai asked, can you tell us why? Did you choose them for the sentimental reason? With all kinds of new games popping up, many new players might not understand my choices, Xuanhuan explained to Mu Donglai and the audience. At that time, entertainment for us was going to the gambling house or listening to songs or stories. High-end entertainment was just hunting demon beasts. When the games such as The Legend of Sword and Fairy and Diablo came out. My goodness. At that time, who would have expected that a monster would drop so many items after being killed, some of which were even ultimate items? At that time, who would know that they could fly by riding on swords? I had goosebumps all over my body by just watching them play the games, Xuanhuan said. Now, the games are each better than the last, but it seems like we can't find the feelings that we once had. At that time, we would chat about items, attributes and properties and skill combinations in Diablo 2 for one night in excitement. We would forget to eat meals when we were in the middle of a warm discussion with friends about the plot of The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1. I was so eager to play when I watched them from behind. Xuanhuan said, but I just couldn't. So, you will play these games to fulfill your old dreams? Mu Donglai asked. You can say that. Then, let's hope Xuanhuan gets to play the games as soon as possible. Mu Donglai said, this is the end of today's live stream. Thank you for watching. I'll go and play games now. Xuanhuan waved at the camera. See you all in my live stream room. The moment that he came to the entrance of the shop, a lily landed from the sky, dressed in a beautiful snow-white silk royal dress and with a Pikachu school bag on her back. She stomped her boots and said curiously, how come the shop owner made the ground outside the shop so soft? Did he do it to celebrate the beginning of my summer break? Yeah, forget it. I must enter the shop now, or that strange big light sphere will catch up with me. She ran into the shop. Who the heck did that? Xuanhuan was about to get up from the ground. He screamed as a milky white light sphere as tall as one man landed from the sky and flew into the shop. He has broken ribs. Hurry, carry him to the Royal Medical House and give him the best medical care. He's not allowed to leave for 1 month. Faint voices came from outside the shop. Let me in. I can still play. Meanwhile, inside the City shop. Xianhuan put down her school bag cheerfully. Boss, get me one computer. Xianhuan, what did you bring here? Nonplussed, Mr. Fang stuck out his head from the back of his seat, wondering how come a big light sphere was in the shop. Does this thing come here to play online? How do I know? Jiangxi Oyu pouted and said in a huff, this big light sphere has followed me since this morning. I don't know where it came from, but it claims to be my little sister. How come my royal father didn't tell me that I have another little sister? It must be an imposter. With a proud expression on her face as if she was saying that she wasn't so gullible, Jiangxi Oyu took out a big bag of potato chips from her little bag, which turned out to be a spatial storage bag. She tore the bag open. Oh, this seaweed flavor is so good. Xiaoyu. Mr. Fang took the bag of potato chips from her and said patiently, I told you that it's a high-calorie food. Look at you, you've gained weight and have a round face. I'll keep this bag of potato chips for you. Besides, it's not right that your academy gives you so many breaks. Mr. Fang took out a big pile of papers from his storage artifact. They were test preparation materials and worksheets for university entrance exams. You need extra classes this summer break. After all, a childhood without the experience of doing extra classes isn't a perfect childhood. Huh? After Mr. Fang put them on her desk, Jiangxi Oyu looked at the pile of papers that towered over her and froze. At this moment, Mr. Fang also looked puzzled. It seems like that the Lord of Godly Court came from beyond the heaven, and it wasn't will of this world. Then, where's the will of this world? How come I've never felt it? As Mr. Fang was engrossed in this thought, a pure white little hand reached out from the light sphere and grabbed a handful of potato chips stealthily. This is indeed puzzling. Mr. Fang gazed at the ceiling and continued to think. The hand took another handful of potato chips. Forget it, I'll give up thinking about it since I can't figure it out. The hand took another handful of potato chips. Mr. Fang snapped back to reality. Seaweed-flavored potato chips are my favorite. I'll eat some. He reached his hand into the bag and froze. Huh? Where are my potato chips? Lifting the empty bag, he looked around with widened eyes and blinked. Chapter 944, The 10-year-long internet story in this world, the end, 2 halves. The Great War had huge effects on the whole world. Although the golden spiritual rain healed most of the damaged places between the heavens and earth and removed all the injuries and diseases from the people who were bathed in it, some people still died. For example, the High Holinesses who had come to help Origin's Internet Club with their spiritual treasures at Shengongbao's persuasion had been killed before the war by the preventive mechanisms left in the spiritual treasures by the Immortal Masters. Due to the backlash of the head-nailing 7 Arrows book, Gatinian reincarnated and returned to Heavenly Academy to cultivate. Of course, there were beneficiaries. Even though the realms other than the mortal world received lower benefits, the Valkyrie who was lying in the pool found that her fingertips shook a little. I can move. Sure enough, her arms could move now. Her breath turned shallow as she murmured, after I recover, I'll wait. It's 8 p.m. now, I'll see what TV series the shop has tonight. At this thought, she immediately cast a spell to show the big screen at the lounge area in the shop. Immediately, she heard the song, I Still Can't Part With You. Let us stay together in the mortal world and live a dashing life. On the big screen were 2 big words, My Fair Princess. TL note, My Fair Princess, also known as Return of the Pearl Princess or Princess Returning Pearl, is a 1998 to 1999 television costume drama. It had been rebroadcasted every summer for more than 10 years, and everyone in China knows about it. What TV series is this? Immediately, she began watching it, engrossed as she lay in the pool. As for the previous gods who had entered the gods' investiture list, they were now busy working day and night in the most dangerous fissures in the world, full of void tribulation thunderbolts. These places couldn't be reached by the golden spiritual rain, and they worked tirelessly to heal these fissures and contribute to the recovery of the world. Many years later, when they finally purged their sins, they could finally return to the gods' investiture platform and shoulder the responsibility of protecting this world. By now, Mr. Fang's internet cafe and its games and movies had spread all over the world. Its arcade games and mobile games were popular even in other realms. Time passed. Some of the old players worked in the shops. For example, Shen Qingqing became the head of the internet cafe's culture and promotion department. Xu Zixin established an association to study gunfighting techniques and was responsible for part of the security work outside the shop. Dong Qinglai, the owner of Wind and Moon Pavilion, had made her business into a chain of stores and offered delicacies in every corner of the world under Mr. Fang's recommendations. Some had grown out of their youthful confusion, realized their dreams, and built their careers. Take Song Qingfing and his two good friends Lin Xiao and Xu Luo as examples. Song Qingfing had joined the expedition into the ruins beyond the sky and explored the secrets of the whole world. Lin Xiao had returned to Linyun Academy, and this former disciple became an instructor. Xu Luo was engaged in the study of the ancient ruins on the continent and had built his own archaeology team to research and uncover the long-forgotten ancient history of this continent. Some people such as Nalan Hongwu had put down the heavy burdens and began to truly enjoy the remaining years of their lives. Some had become entertainment or technical streamers and brought excellent game guides and happiness to people all over the world. Even the independent warriors such as Liang Shi and Fatty Wang Tai had their own properties, established families, and lived busy lives. Of course, Nalan Mingsu must be mentioned. She was now controlling one of the biggest industries in the world, the mobile games industry. It had become more and more difficult and almost impossible for them to gather together and do overnight trades or discuss game guides for a whole day as in the old days. Another year-end drew near. Mr. Fang sat on a couch next to the window and lit a cigarette. The customers thronged in the shop as usual. "Have you tried the new game, Chicken Dinner?" A few young people who were about 13 years walked into the shop. They wore the clothes of the nearby big families with badges of Linyun Academy pinned on their chests. TL note, it is the nickname for PUBG in China. League of Legends released limited edition skins. It's said one of them is Dragon Fist Lee Sin. In the shop, a young man who was about 16 years said, "I'm going to buy Jade Dragon Wukong." Another young man said, "I heard that Instructor Wu of Shengjing Academy is going to take people to the Luke Raid in Dungeon Fighter Online for free today." A few figures walked in. "Hurry up. There'll be no spots for us if we're late." At this moment, light snow fell from the sky. Mr. Fang looked up. The smirk face emoji in the shop would still come out draped in a quilt. But the active players in the shop were no longer the same ones. They were in their youth. And somehow, Mr. Fang saw his younger self in them. After finishing one cigarette, Mr. Fang gazed at the bustling crowd in the shop, feeling a bit lonesome. Suddenly, it struck him that he had come to this world for more than 10 years. Looking at the young people coming and going, he sometimes missed his youthful self who used to play in the internet cafe. At this moment, Sutanji got off her live stream. Then, she put down the virtual reality headset, bought 2 mugs of cappuccino, and walked over from the counter. Dressed in warrior's clothes, Lin Xiao walked in with ice and snow all over his head. While brushing off snow from his clothes, he chuckled and said, "A student sneaked out to hunt demon beasts and got in danger. It took me some time to find him." He looked around. "I hope I'm not late." "No, you're not," Mr. Fang said with a smile. "You're the second. Hee, you guys are early." And Huai opened the door and looked toward the lounge area. Then, he glanced around and froze before saying, "Brother Liang, how have you been?" Liang Shi also walked into the shop. "Well, I'm quite busy since the year-end is here. People like Nalan Hongwu, Royal Princess Qiu, Xu Zixin, Shen Qingqing, and half-cities Mo Tanxing and Ningbai arrived one by one. They filed in, putting away their umbrellas and bamboo cloaks. Then, they bought a cup of their favorite beverage and sat on the couches in the lounge area, just like they had done in the old days. "Now, you are all busy." With a smile, Mr. Fang extinguished the cigarette butt and said, I booked a private compartment in the Wind and Moon Pavilion. It's a rare occasion for you to return here, and tomorrow is New Year's Eve, so let's have a New Year's Eve dinner tonight in advance. Ha ha ha, okay. The shop is as busy as usual. It's busier. Sir, where's Xuanhuan? Sutanji asked. I sent her to Wind and Moon Pavilion to order the dishes. Huh? Is everyone here? It seems like we are missing a few. And Huai looked around. Where's that kid Song Kingfing? It's said that he set off yesterday and should be here today. When they pushed open the door and looked out of the shop, they saw a young man who was close to 30 years old coming over from the end of the street, dressed in a military uniform. His previous handsome face had some signs of weather and age, with a scar beside one of his eyes. With an experienced and decisive presence, he greeted them with a military salute. Young master, Song? Ha 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 ha, dude, I almost can't recognize you. Let's go, we brothers have to have a few cups together. No going back unless we all get drunk. Mr. Fang laughed. Today, we'll all get drunk. Oh. Ha 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 ha. They disappeared at the end of the street. When spring came, Mr. Fang entrusted the management of the Internet Club to the staff and walked to the distance with a simple bag on his shoulders. Perhaps he would to this beautiful world as he had promised himself. Perhaps he wanted to find a way to return to his home world. Who knows? A figure caught up with him. In the dusk, breezes brushed her calm face and fluttered her pure white dress hem. With snowflakes falling on her shoulders, she felt the lightness of setting down a heavy burden. The mild and elegant voice said, I plan to tour around the world as well. Can I join you? Okay.